The massive crystal halls of the Imperial Palace shook as another report came through the communication array. Emperor Zalthek's 6 eyes dimmed with each word from Fleet Admiral Vex Tar. 3 more star systems had fallen to the Void Hunters in the past week. The ancient machine intelligence that had emerged from the dark space between galaxies was consuming everything in its path. Your Majesty. Admiral Vex. Tar's voice crackled through the holographic display. His usually proud Zentorian features showed clear signs of exhaustion. The 7th Battle Fleet is gone. Admiral Kethron managed to evacuate only 12% of his forces before the machines overwhelmed our defensive positions around Zirion Prime. The Emperor's massive form leaned back in his throne, the bioluminescent patterns on his skin pulsing with stress. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 species stood in stunned silence. The Galactic Empire had ruled for over 10,000 years. They had faced rebellions, cosmic storms, and even the occasional rogue AI, but nothing like this. How many ships do we have left? Asked Counselor Yithra, her crystalline voice echoing in the chamber. Fewer than 800 combat-ready vessels across all fleets, Vex Tar replied. The Void Hunters learn from every engagement. They adapt to our weapons, our tactics, our communication frequencies. What destroys them in one battle fails completely in the next. High Strategist Mordoon stepped forward, his ancient Valian features creased with worry. We have tried every tactical approach known to military science. Coordinated assaults, guerrilla strikes, defensive formations. The machines counter everything within hours. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Some called for immediate evacuation of the core worlds. Others demanded a final, desperate assault on the Void Hunter staging areas. A few suggested attempting to negotiate, though everyone knew machines had never responded to diplomatic contact. Emperor Zalthek raised one of his massive hands, and silence returned. There is one option we have not considered. The assembled representatives waited. The Emperor had ruled wisely for 3 centuries. If he had an idea, they would listen. The humans, he said simply. The reaction was immediate. Several counselors made sounds of disbelief. The humans were the newest members of the Empire, having joined only 50 years ago. Their technology was primitive by galactic standards. They still used chemical rockets for basic transport and projectile weapons in ground combat. Your Majesty, Counselor Yithra said carefully. With all respect, the humans have contributed little to Imperial defense. Their largest ship is barely the size of a standard Imperial cruiser. Their weapons cannot penetrate modern shields, added Admiral Vex Tar, and their tactical doctrine is unconventional at best. The Emperor's skin patterns shifted to a deeper blue. Perhaps unconventional is exactly what we need. The Void Hunters predict our every move because we fight as we have always fought. The humans fight differently. High Strategist Mordoon nodded slowly. There is wisdom in this. The machines have adapted to Imperial tactics because they are logical, predictable. Human tactics are often irrational. They are barbarians, muttered Trade Counselor Hexval under his breath. Barbarians who have never lost a war, the Emperor corrected. In 50 years of membership, they have resolved 4 separate conflicts through methods our best strategists never considered. The room fell quiet as the representatives remembered. The Corvani rebellion had lasted 6 months, until human negotiators somehow convinced the rebels to join a joint mining operation. The Thalarian pirates had terrorized shipping lanes for years, until human captains started hunting them using tactics that violated every rule of civilized warfare. Send the communication, Emperor Zalthek decided. Contact their fleet commander. Offer them whatever they ask for. Admiral Vex Tar hesitated. Your Majesty, are you certain? The humans may demand significant concessions for their aid. Well, what concessions matter if our civilization no longer exists? The Emperor replied. 3 days later, The transmission reached human space. Captain Jinwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, humanity's largest warship. At 600 meters long, it was modest compared to Imperial dreadnoughts, but it represented humanity's best technology. "Captain," Communications Officer Sarah Chen called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Imperial Command. It's encrypted with emergency protocols." Park was a veteran of the colonial wars and the Mars independence conflict. His calm demeanor and strategic mind had earned him command of humanity's most advanced vessel. "Put it through to my ready room. And contact Admiral Wei Ming. She needs to hear this. I Wei." Quote, "I Wei." In the privacy of his quarters, Park watched as Emperor Zalthek himself appeared on the screen. The massive alien leader's usual confidence was replaced by something Park had never seen before. Fear. "Captain Park," the Emperor began, "the Galactic Empire faces extinction. An enemy unlike any we have encountered is destroying our fleets and consuming our worlds. Our most advanced weapons and strategies have failed. We request humanity's assistance." Park listened as the Emperor described the Void Hunters, self-replicating machines that learned and adapted, fleets that could counter any known tactic within hours, technology that grew stronger with each victory. "What do you need from us, Your Majesty?" Park asked when the message ended. "Everything you can send. Every ship, every weapon, every tactical idea your people possess. In exchange, humanity will receive full status as a founding member of the Empire, with all the privileges that entails." Park considered this. Full founding status would give humanity access to technologies centuries ahead of their current capabilities. Trade rights, territorial expansion, representation in the High Council. But it would also mean putting human lives at risk against an enemy that had defeated the combined might of 47 advanced civilizations. "I'll need to consult with my superiors," Park replied. "But Captain, you should know something about humans. We don't fight for privileges or territories. We fight for each other. If the Empire is our ally, then your people are our people." The Emperor's skin patterns shifted to what Park had learned, indicated surprise. "You would risk human lives for non-human civilians?" "Your Majesty," Park said with a slight smile. "That's what we do." Within hours, the human response was transmitted across Imperial space. 57 ships would depart for the front lines immediately. It wasn't much by Imperial standards, but it was everything humanity had available for military action. As the Indomitable Spirit prepared for departure, Park stood on the observation deck, watching Earth recede behind them. They were heading toward an enemy that had crushed every force sent against it. The odds were impossible, the technology gap overwhelming. But Park had learned something during humanity's violent history. Sometimes the most important victories came not from superior weapons or numbers, but from refusing to give up when any reasonable person would surrender. The Void Hunters were about to learn that humans were rarely reasonable. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the Kepler station staging area, and the reaction from Imperial forces was immediate. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Celestial Dawn, watching the tactical display with growing confusion. "These are their warships?" asked Fleet Coordinator Thyssen, her insectoid mandibles clicking with what Vextar recognized as amusement. The human vessels looked primitive compared to the sleek, crystalline designs of Imperial technology. Where Empire ships flowed like living metal, human ships looked like they had been built in industrial forges. Angular hulls covered in armor plating, weapon systems that jutted out like spines, and engine exhausts that glowed with simple fusion fire. "Sir," the tactical officer reported, "the human flagship is requesting permission to dock for tactical briefing." Admiral Vexistar sighed. Protocol demanded he meet with the human commander, though he doubted they could contribute much to the war effort. "Granted. Have them dock at Bay 7. 2. 30 minutes later, Captain Jinwoo Park entered the Celestial Dawn's command center alongside Admiral Chen Wei Ming, the overall commander of human forces. The Imperial officers stood at attention, though Vextar noticed several barely concealed expressions of disappointment. "Admiral Vextar," Park said, offering a human military salute. "Thank you for allowing us to join your forces." Vextar returned the gesture, though the human greeting felt awkward to his six-armed physiology. "Captain Park, Admiral Chen. I must admit, we were expecting a larger force." Admiral Chen smiled. She was a veteran of 3 major conflicts and had earned her position through tactical brilliance rather than political connections. 57 ships is everything we can spare from system defense. Our destroyers carry crews of 150. Our cruisers have 300. The Indomitable Spirit carries a crew of 800. The Imperial officers exchanged glances. The smallest Imperial vessel carried crews of over 1,000. Their dreadnoughts housed populations larger than most human cities. "Perhaps you could explain your tactical capabilities," Vextar said diplomatically. "What weapon systems do you employ against hardened targets?" "Oh, primarily kinetic," Park replied. "Railguns, missile systems, and close-range plasma cutters. Our ships are designed for close combat." Fleet Coordinator Thissen's mandibles clicked again. "Kinetic weapons?" "Captain, the Void Hunters employ adaptive armor systems. Physical projectiles become ineffective after the first few impacts." "So we've heard," Admiral Chen said. "That's why we don't plan to rely on our weapons to win this war." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Admiral Vex Tar leaned forward in his command chair. "Then, how do you plan to contribute to combat operations?" "By being unpredictable," Chen replied. "May I see your tactical records from the previous engagements?" For the next 2 hours, the human commanders studied Imperial battle footage. They watched as perfectly coordinated Imperial fleets engaged the Void Hunters in textbook formations. Energy shields deflecting particle beams. Plasma weapons carving through machine hulls. Tactical networks sharing information at light speed. And they watched as the Void Hunters adapted. First slowly, then with increasing speed. Weapons that destroyed entire machine formations in one battle became useless in the next. Shield frequencies that provided perfect protection were penetrated within hours. "Your people fight like a symphony orchestra," Admiral Chen observed. "Every ship knows its part. Every movement is coordinated. Every action serves the greater strategy. Ru. This is how civilized warfare is conducted," Vextar replied with some pride. "And that's exactly why you're losing," Park said bluntly. The Imperial officers bristled. Several made sounds of offense. Vextar raised a hand for calm. "Explain." "The machines learn from patterns," Chen continued. "They analyze your formations, your communication protocols, your weapon rotations. They predict your next move, because your tactics follow logical progressions. Human tactics follow no logical progression," Park added. "Sometimes that's because we don't have enough information to make logical decisions. Sometimes it's because we choose to ignore logic entirely." Admiral Vex Tar considered this. "You fight chaotically?" "We fight adaptively," Chen corrected. "Every human captain has the authority to ignore orders if battlefield conditions require it. Every crew is trained to think independently. We don't fight like one mind controlling many ships. We fight like many minds making individual decisions." The concept seemed to disturb the Imperial officers. Coordinator Thyssen spoke first. "How do you maintain unit cohesion? How do you prevent friendly fire incidents? How do you execute complex maneuvers?" "We don't execute complex maneuvers," Park replied. "We execute simple objectives using whatever methods work. Sometimes that means ramming enemy ships. Sometimes it means boarding actions. Sometimes it means using our own vessels as improvised weapons." "Barbaric," muttered Tactical Officer Krenth. "Effective," Chen countered. "Captain, how long has it been since your people lost a military engagement?" Vex Tar thought carefully. "The Corvani rebellion ended favorably, but that was through negotiation, not military victory. Before that? The siege of Altair 7, approximately 40 years ago. And before that? Vextar's expression grew uncomfortable. The truth was that Imperial forces had not faced a serious military challenge in over a century. Their technology was so advanced, their coordination so perfect, that most conflicts ended before they truly began. How long since humans lost a war? Park asked. We've never lost a war, Chen replied simply. We've lost battles, operations, even entire campaigns. But we've never stopped fighting until we won. The admission created an uncomfortable silence. The Imperial officers were beginning to understand that they were dealing with a species that had very different ideas about warfare and victory. What do you need from us? Vextar asked finally. Information, Chen replied. Technical specifications on Void Hunter adaptation capabilities. Communication frequencies they've intercepted. Tactical patterns they've learned to counter. And then? Then we ignore everything your people have learned about proper military tactics, Park said. We use weapons that make no sense, formations that violate basic strategy, and communication methods that seem primitive. Admiral Chen stood and walked to the tactical display. Admiral Vextar, your people have been fighting this enemy for months, using the most advanced military doctrine in the galaxy. You've achieved exactly what that doctrine predicts. Efficient, coordinated defeat. She gestured toward the human fleet positions on the display. We're going to fight them, using approaches that violate every principle of advanced warfare. We're going to be crude, unpredictable, and tactically inefficient. And you believe this will work? Vextar asked. We believe this is the only thing that might work, Park replied. The Void Hunters have learned to counter perfection. They haven't learned to counter chaos. As the human commanders prepared to return to their fleet, Admiral Vextar felt a mixture of hope and dread. These humans seemed confident, but their methods sounded like organized suicide. Captain Park, he called out as they reached the docking bay. What happens if your unconventional tactics fail? Park paused at the airlock entrance. Then, we try more unconventional tactics. Admiral, the one thing humans have never learned how to do is surrender when people we care about are in danger. As the human shuttle departed, Admiral Vextar stood watching through the observation port. In 6 hours, they would face the Void Hunters again. This time, with allies who seemed to think military suicide was a valid tactical option. For the first time since this war began, Vextar felt something he had not expected. Curiosity about what would happen next. The Void Hunter Armada emerged from hyperspace like a geometric nightmare. Admiral Vex's Tar watched from the bridge of the Celestial Dawn as sensors registered over 300 enemy vessels. Each ship was a perfect fusion of mathematics and death, their crystalline black hulls seeming to absorb light itself. Fleet positions confirmed, reported Tactical Officer Krenth. Imperial forces. 412 vessels in standard defensive formation. Human forces. 57 vessels in. Irregular patterns. Vextar studied the tactical display with growing confusion. The human ships had deployed in what appeared to be random clusters, scattered throughout the battle zone. No clear formation. No obvious tactical objective. No coordination with Imperial positioning. Communications from the human flagship, his aide reported. Captain Park's voice came through clearly. Admiral Vextar. Imperial forces should engage as planned. Human vessels will operate independently. Captain, this violates every principle of coordinated defense, Vextar replied. We need unified command structure to maximize effectiveness. Admiral. Unified command structure is exactly what the Void Hunters expect. They've been studying Imperial tactics for months. They know how your fleets move. Before Vexitar could respond, the enemy ships began their approach. The Void Hunters moved in perfect synchronization, their formations flowing like liquid metal across space. Long-range sensors, showed energy signatures, building along their weapon systems. All Imperial ships, Vextar broadcast, execute defensive pattern Omega-7. Energy shields to maximum. Maintain formation integrity. The Imperial fleet responded with practiced precision. 400 ships moved as one organism, creating overlapping shield networks and concentrated firing solutions. It was beautiful to watch, a testament to thousands of years of military evolution. The Void Hunters opened fire first. Particle beams lanced across space, probing the Imperial defenses. Where previous battles had seen immediate adaptation, this time the machines seemed cautious, testing responses before committing to full assault. "They're analyzing our formation," Fleet Coordinator Thissison observed. "Energy patterns suggest they're running tactical simulations." The Imperial fleet returned fire, plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes striking Void Hunter vessels. Several machine ships took damage, but their hull configurations began shifting, adapting to the weapon frequencies within minutes. "Sir," Krenth reported with growing concern, "enemy adaptation rate is increasing. They're countering our primary weapons systems." Vextar nodded grimly. This was how every previous battle had unfolded. Perfect coordination met by perfect adaptation. The Empire's greatest strength becoming their fatal weakness. Then the human ships began moving. "What are they doing?" Thyssen asked, staring at the tactical display. The human vessels had abandoned any pretense of formation. Individual ships were accelerating directly toward the Void Hunter lines, their engines burning at what sensors indicated was maximum output. No coordination, no communication with the main fleet, no apparent tactical objective. "Captain Park," Vextar called urgently, "your forces are breaking formation. You're heading directly into concentrated fire zones." "Confirmed, Admiral," Park replied calmly. "Beginning independent operations." The first human destroyer, the Soul's Pride, reached the Void Hunter perimeter, traveling at ramming speed. Instead of engaging in conventional combat, it fired its entire missile payload at point-blank range, then used its momentum to physically collide with a machine ship twice its size. Both vessels exploded in a brilliant flash of released energy. "By the Seven Suns," Thyssen breathed. "They're conducting suicide attacks." But the humans weren't finished. The destroyer, Brazilia's Thunder, approached a cluster of Void Hunter vessels and began firing its kinetic weapons, not at the ships themselves, but at the space around them, creating debris fields that disrupted machine movements. Captain Maria Santos of the cruiser Darwin's Revenge took her ship directly through the center of a Void Hunter formation, launching boarding pods as she passed. Human Marines in powered armor began cutting their way into machine hulls using plasma cutters and explosive charges. "Impossible," Krenth muttered. "No biological being has ever successfully boarded a Void Hunter vessel." The machine fleet's response was immediate but confused. Their perfect formations began wavering as individual ships tried to shake off human borders. The mathematical precision of their movements deteriorated as they dealt with threats that made no tactical sense. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the Void Hunters are attempting to jam human communications." "Confirmed," came Captain Park's voice. Switching to analog backup systems. "All human vessels, execute. Plan chaos." Plan chaos, apparently, meant that human ships began acting with even less coordination than before. The cruiser, Johannesburg's Hope, began using its own damaged sections as improvised projectile weapons. The destroyer, Mumbai's Defiance, started broadcasting human music on all frequencies while conducting hit-and-run attacks that followed no predictable pattern. "They're not following any known tactical doctrine," Admiral Vextar said in amazement. "Because there isn't one," came Captain Park's voice. "Every human ship has a different objective. Every captain is making individual decisions. The machines can't predict our next move because we don't know our next move." The effect on the Void Hunter fleet was unprecedented. Ships that had adapted to every Imperial strategy began making erratic movements. Their weapon targeting became less accurate as they tried to track multiple individual threats instead of a coordinated formation. The Imperial fleet watched in fascination as human vessels engaged in combat methods that violated every principle of civilized warfare. The frigate Beijing's Thunder actually used its docking clamps to grab a Void Hunter ship and drag it into the path of another machine's weapons fire. "Sir," Tactical Officer Krenth reported with excitement, "Void Hunter adaptation protocols are failing. They're showing decreased response efficiency across all combat parameters." Captain Park's voice came through the communications system again. "Admiral Vex Tar. Recommend Imperial forces begin independent operations. Don't fight like a fleet. Fight like individual ships, with individual objectives." The suggestion went against everything Admiral Vex Tar had learned about naval combat. Coordinated formation fighting was the foundation of Imperial military doctrine. "Admiral, Fleet Coordinator," Thiessen said urgently, "the human approach is working. Void Hunter losses are exceeding projections." Vextar watched as the cruiser Legus's Victory engaged 3 Void Hunter ships simultaneously, using tactics that seemed to change every few seconds. Ramming attacks followed by boarding actions followed by point-blank missile strikes. The machines couldn't adapt because there was no consistent pattern to adapt to. "All Imperial vessels," Vextar broadcast, surprising himself with the order. "Break formation. Engage enemy ships using individual initiative. Ignore tactical coordination protocols." The response was immediate chaos, but productive chaos. Imperial ships that had been moving in predictable patterns suddenly became unpredictable. Captains who had relied on fleet coordination began making independent decisions. The Void Hunter fleet, which had been gradually gaining tactical advantage through adaptation, found itself facing 40 different fighting styles instead of one coordinated strategy. Their perfect synchronization began to collapse as individual machine ships tried to counter attacks that bore no resemblance to previous engagements. "Energy signatures from the Void Hunter command ship," Krenth reported. "They're attempting to implement mass tactical recalibration." Through the tactical display, they could see the enormous command vessel at the center of the machine formation. It was 3 times larger than any other ship in either fleet, a crystalline nightmare of computing power and weapon systems. That's their central intelligence, Admiral Vex Tar realized. If it's trying to recalibrate their entire fleet simultaneously, then it's having trouble processing individual tactical variations. Captain Park finished. "Admiral, recommend concentrated assault on the command ship while their adaptation protocols are overloaded." For the first time in the entire war, Admiral Vex Tar found himself smiling. The humans had done something impossible. They had made the Void Hunters confused. "All Imperial vessels," he broadcast, "converge on the enemy command ship. Use whatever tactics you think might work." The result was a battle unlike any in galactic history. Nearly 500 ships from 2 different species, each fighting according to their own individual judgment, launched a completely uncoordinated assault on an enemy that had never faced anything but perfect military precision. And for the first time since the war began, the machines started losing. The space around the Void Hunter command ship had become a swirling storm of chaos. Human and Imperial vessels darted between the massive machine escorts like angry insects, each ship fighting according to its own tactical interpretation. Captain Jinwoo Park stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, watching his crew work with practiced efficiency despite the madness surrounding them. Damage reports scrolled across his tactical display, and none of them were encouraging. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 9, reported Chief Engineer Yang Min-jun. "Emergency seals are holding, but we've lost 30% of our forward armor plating." "Weapons status?" Park asked. "Port railguns are offline, Weapons Officer," Lisa Chen replied. "Starboard systems operational, but ammunition reserves are at 40%. Through the bridge windows, Park could see the Void Hunter command ship looming ahead. It was a geometric masterpiece of destruction, its crystalline hull reflecting the explosions and energy discharges around it, like a dark mirror. Smaller machine ships moved in protective formations around their central intelligence, but their movements lacked the perfect coordination they had displayed at the battle's beginning. "Captain," Communications Officer Sarah Chen called out. "We're receiving boarding reports from the Soul's Revenge and the Mumbai's Defiance." Park activated the Tactical Communications Network. "Soul's Revenge. Report status." Captain Kim Tae-hyun's voice came through amid the sound of plasma cutters and explosions. "We've breached the outer hull of Machine Vessel 7 Alpha. Marine squads are placing charges on what appear to be processing centers. Mumbai's Defiance. Status report." "This is Lieutenant Commander Patel," came the reply. "Captain Rodriguez was killed in the initial boarding action, but we've established a foothold inside Machine Vessel 4 Beta. These things are built like computer networks. Every section we destroy reduces their overall processing power." Park nodded with grim satisfaction. The human boarding tactics were proving more effective than anyone had predicted. While Imperial forces fought the machines ship to ship, human crews were literally dismantling their enemies from the inside. "Sir," Tactical Officer David Morrison reported, "the Imperial cruiser Stellar Wind is attempting a synchronized attack with the heavy destroyer Golden Hammer. They're coordinating their assault on the command ship's port defensive cluster." Park watched through his tactical display as the two Imperial ships executed a textbook flanking maneuver, their plasma weapons carving through machine escorts with devastating efficiency. But even as they achieved their objective, he could see Void Hunter reinforcements moving to counter the coordinated assault. "Stellar Wind, Golden Hammer," Park called out. "Break coordination immediately. Continue individual attacks on separate targets." "Captain Park," came the reply from the Stellar Wind's commander. "Our synchronized approach is achieving optimal results." "For another 30 seconds, Park replied urgently. "Then the machines will have adapted to your coordination patterns. Break formation now." The Imperial ships hesitated for a moment, then split apart. Just as they did, massive particle beams fired through the space they had occupied. The machine targeting systems had predicted their coordinated movement perfectly, but failed to anticipate the sudden change to individual action. "All human vessels," Park broadcast, "priority target is the command ship. Use whatever methods you think might work, but don't coordinate with anyone else." The response was immediate and diverse. The destroyer Buenos Aires's Fury began using its escape pods as improvised missiles, loading them with explosives and launching them at machine defensive positions. The cruiser Stockholm's Hope started broadcasting false surrender signals while positioning itself for ramming attacks. Captain Elena Vasquez of the frigate Sao Paulo's Dream took perhaps the most unusual approach. She began flying her ship in patterns that spelled out human curse words, using the confusion to mask her actual tactical movements. "Captain," Sarah Chen reported with something approaching amusement, "Admiral Vextar is requesting tactical clarification on our combat approach." Park activated fleet communications. "Admiral, how are Imperial forces performing?" 9. "Better than expected," Vextar replied. "Individual ship effectiveness has increased by approximately 40% since we abandoned formation fighting. However, our losses are still significant." Park studied his tactical display. Nearly a quarter of the combined fleet had been destroyed or disabled, but Void Hunter losses were approaching 50%. For the first time in the war, they were winning. "Admiral, recommend that Imperial forces begin boarding operations on damaged machine ships." "Captain, our personnel have no experience with internal ship combat." "Then learn quickly," Park replied. "Every machine ship we capture reduces their fleet intelligence. This isn't about destroying them faster than they can adapt. This is about making them unable to adapt at all." The indomitable spirit shuddered as a particle beam grazed its hull. Park felt the deck plating buckle under his feet, but the ship's momentum carried them closer to their target. "Engineering. How long until we can attempt final approach on the command ship? 10 minutes, Captain, Yang Minjun replied. But we need to reduce speed for the boarding pods to achieve target lock. Negative. We're not boarding that thing. Park walked to the tactical station and began entering commands into the navigation system. We're ramming it. 8. The bridge fell silent for a moment. Chief Navigator James O'Sullivan was the first to speak. Sir, ramming the command ship will destroy the Indomitable Spirit. That vessel is nearly 3 kilometers long. Confirmed, Park replied calmly. But it will also destroy their central intelligence unit. Without coordination, the remaining machines become individual targets instead of a collective threat. Captain, Sarah Chen said quietly, there are 800 crew members aboard this ship. Park looked around the bridge at his officers. These people had served with him through 3 major conflicts. They had families, futures, dreams beyond this battle. But they also understood what was at stake. All crew, he announced over the ship's internal communications. This is the captain. In approximately 8 minutes, the Indomitable Spirit will attempt a ramming attack on the Void Hunter command vessel. All non-essential personnel are ordered to evacuation pods immediately. He paused, watching his crew. None of them moved toward the exits. Sir, Chief Engineer Yang said firmly. The engines need constant monitoring for maximum impact velocity. I'm staying. Navigation systems require manual control for target approach, Navigator O'Sullivan added. I'm staying. One by one, every officer on the bridge confirmed they would remain at their stations. Across the ship, Park knew similar conversations were taking place. Human crews faced with certain death, choosing duty over survival. Captain Park. Admiral Vex Tar's voice came through communications. Imperial sensors show your ship on collision course with the command vessel. Are you experiencing navigation failure? Negative, Admiral. This is intentional. Captain, that approach is suicide. Admiral, Park replied, watching the massive command ship grow larger through the bridge windows. Sometimes, the most rational tactical decision is to act irrationally. The Indomitable Spirit accelerated toward its target, hull groaning under the strain of maximum engine output. Around them, human and Imperial ships continued their chaotic individual battles, each crew fighting according to their own judgment and initiative. 2 minutes to impact, O'Sullivan reported. Park activated fleet communications one final time. All vessels. This is Captain Park. Continue individual operations. Don't coordinate, don't predict, don't give them patterns to analyze. Fight like humans. The command ship loomed ahead, its defensive systems beginning to target the approaching human vessel. But the Void Hunters had spent months learning to counter coordinated fleet actions. They had no experience with individual ships willing to sacrifice themselves for tactical advantage. 30 seconds to impact, O'Sullivan announced. Park looked around the bridge one last time. It has been an honor serving with all of you. The Indomitable Spirit struck the Void Hunter command ship at maximum velocity, its 800-meter hull driving deep into the crystalline structure of the machine intelligence. The explosion could be seen from 3 star systems away. The shockwave from the collision between the Indomitable Spirit and the Void Hunter command ship rippled across the battlefield like a stone dropped in still water. Admiral Vex Tar watched from the bridge of the Celestial Dawn as both vessels disappeared in an expanding sphere of white-hot plasma and twisted metal. By the 7 suns, Fleet Coordinator Thyssen whispered, her mandibles clicking in what Vex Tar recognized as shock. They actually did it. The tactical display showed the immediate aftermath. Where the massive command ship had been orchestrating machine fleet movements, there was now only debris and radiation. But more importantly, the behavior of the remaining Void Hunter vessels changed dramatically within seconds. Sir, Tactical Officer Krenth reported with growing excitement. Enemy coordination has ceased entirely. Individual machine ships are operating independently. Vex Tar studied the sensor readings with amazement. Without their central intelligence, the Void Hunter fleet had transformed from a unified threat into nearly 200 individual ships, each responding to immediate tactical situations without overall strategy. "Admiral," came a transmission from Captain Elena Vasquez of the human frigate Sao Paulo's Dream, "recommend immediate concentrated assault on isolated machine vessels. They can't share tactical information anymore." The remaining human ships, now numbering 31 after the devastating battle, began executing attacks that would have been impossible against a coordinated enemy. Single vessels engaged multiple machine ships simultaneously, using the confusion and lack of coordination to devastating effect. "All Imperial vessels," Vextar broadcast. "Engage enemy ships individually. Focus on isolated targets. Execute independent tactical decisions." The result was a massacre, but not the kind the Void Hunters had inflicted on previous Imperial fleets. Machine ships that had adapted to counter every known tactic found themselves facing approaches they couldn't predict because their opponents weren't coordinating with each other. The Imperial cruiser Radiant Dawn engaged a cluster of machine vessels using a combination of Imperial plasma weapons and human-inspired ramming tactics. Captain Yildar, who had served in the Imperial Navy for 40 years, found himself ordering maneuvers that violated every principle of his training. "Target their processing centers," he commanded. "Then ram their weapons clusters while they're adapting to our energy signatures." The human destroyer, Soul's Pride, severely damaged but still functional, had taken a different approach. Captain Kim Tae-hyun was leading boarding parties armed with primitive explosive charges and plasma cutters, systematically dismantling machine ships from the inside. "Imperial vessels," Kim called out over the communications network, "send boarding parties to any machine ship showing damage. These things are built like computer networks. Physical damage to processing centers reduces their individual intelligence." Admiral Chen Wei-ming, who had transferred her command to the cruiser Darwin's Revenge after her flagship was destroyed, coordinated the scattered human forces with the efficiency of someone who had spent her entire career fighting against impossible odds. "All human ships," she broadcast, "ignore tactical doctrine. Use whatever methods seem appropriate for your individual situation. The machines can't adapt to chaos." The battle continued for 6 more hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. Without central coordination, the Void Hunters fought like individual machines rather than a collective intelligence. Each ship adapted to local threats without sharing information, making the same mistakes repeatedly across different parts of the battlefield. Captain Maria Santos of the cruiser Darwin's Revenge discovered that machine ships had difficulty processing multiple simultaneous threats. She began using her ship's escape pods as decoys while conducting plasma cutter attacks on machine hull sections. The Imperial heavy destroyer Golden Hammer found that Void Hunter vessels couldn't adapt to constantly changing weapon frequencies. Captain Morville began rotating through his entire arsenal every 30 seconds, preventing the machines from developing effective countermeasures. By the time the last machine ship was destroyed, the combined human and Imperial fleet had achieved something unprecedented, a complete victory over the Void Hunters with acceptable losses. Admiral Vex Tar stood on the observation deck of the Celestial Dawn, looking out at the debris field that had once been an unstoppable enemy fleet. Final casualty reports were still coming in, but the numbers told a story he could barely believe. Human losses: 26 ships destroyed, including their flagship. 800 crew members had died with Captain Park on the Indomitable Spirit. Another 400 had been killed in boarding actions and ramming attacks. Imperial losses: 137 vessels destroyed or disabled. Approximately 40,000 personnel killed or wounded. Void Hunter losses: complete destruction of 312 ships, including their command vessel and central intelligence unit. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving priority transmission from Emperor Zalthek." The Emperor's image appeared on the main display, his bioluminescent patterns showing what Vextar recognized as relief and amazement. "Admiral Vextar, report status of the Void Hunter threat." "Your Majesty, the enemy fleet has been completely destroyed. The threat to Imperial space has been eliminated. The Emperor's patterns shifted to deep satisfaction. And our human allies? 31 ships remain operational. Admiral Chen Wei-Ming is coordinating rescue operations for survivors from destroyed vessels. I wish to speak with Admiral Chen immediately. Admiral Chen appeared on the communication display, her uniform torn, and her face showing the exhaustion of prolonged combat. But her expression was calm, professional. Admiral Chen, the Emperor began. The Galactic Empire owes humanity a debt that cannot be measured. Your people saved our civilization. Your Majesty, Chen replied, our people fought alongside Imperial forces as equals. This was a victory for all of us. Nevertheless, humanity will receive the promised status as a founding member of the Empire, with all associated privileges. Additionally, I am authorizing immediate technology transfers to bring human military capabilities to Imperial standards. Chen nodded gratefully, but her expression remained serious. Your Majesty, there's something you need to understand about what happened here. The Emperor's patterns showed curiosity. Please explain. The Void Hunters weren't defeated by superior technology or numbers. They were defeated because they couldn't predict our behavior. But that's because we fight differently than your people. How so? Admiral Chen looked directly at the Emperor's image. Imperial forces fight like a civilization that has known peace and prosperity for centuries. Your military doctrine assumes rational opponents making logical decisions. Your tactics are designed for honorable warfare between civilized species. She paused, studying the debris field visible through the bridge windows. Humans fight like a species that has spent its entire history at war with itself. We don't assume our enemies will be rational. We don't fight honorably when survival is at stake. We fight to win. Admiral Vextar found himself nodding in agreement. The human approach to warfare is disturbing, but effective. Admiral Vextar is correct, Chen continued. Our tactics work because they're crude, unpredictable, and often suicidal. Captain Park and his crew died to destroy that command ship, but they made that choice willingly. The Emperor's patterns shifted to thoughtful consideration. Are you suggesting that Imperial military doctrine requires fundamental changes? I'm suggesting that the galaxy is larger and more dangerous than we realized, Chen replied. The Void Hunters were just one threat. There may be others that require different approaches. What do you recommend? Admiral Chen smiled for the first time since the battle ended. Your Majesty, I recommend that Imperial and human forces begin joint training exercises. Teach us your technology and coordination. Let us teach you flexibility and improvisation. You would share human tactical knowledge with Imperial forces? Your Majesty, after today, Imperial forces and human forces are the same thing. We're all defenders of the same civilization. Emperor Zalthek's patterns showed deep approval. Admiral Chen, you and your surviving personnel are invited to the Imperial Palace for a ceremony recognizing your service. The entire Empire will know what humanity sacrificed for our freedom. Thank you, Your Majesty. But first, we need to recover our people from the wreckage. As the communication ended, Admiral Vextar approached Admiral Chen. Admiral, I owe you an apology. When your ships first arrived, I believed you had little to contribute to this conflict. Chen nodded. Admiral, when we first arrived, I believed your people had forgotten how to fight for their lives. We were both wrong. Vextar studied the tactical display, where human and Imperial ships were working together to rescue survivors and secure the battlefield. Admiral, what happens now? Now we go home, Chen replied. We repair our ships, honor our dead, and prepare for whatever threatens the galaxy next. And if another enemy appears, something as dangerous as the Void Hunters? Admiral Chen looked out at the stars beyond the battlefield, where Imperial and human vessels moved in loose formation toward home. Then they'll discover that the galaxy now has defenders who learn to fight like humans. The combined fleet departed the battlefield 12 hours later, leaving behind only wreckage and the legend of the day when humanity taught the galaxy that sometimes the most civilized response to impossible odds was to abandon civilization entirely. In the Imperial archives, the battle would be recorded as the victory at Kepler Station. Human historians would call it the day we saved everyone. Both were correct.